Ready? Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting. My name is Tim Ormond, and I'm serving as chair. This is our Wednesday, July 17th, 2024 meeting. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the committee page. Members of the public are also welcome to listen to the meeting live in the first floor conference room of City Hall, which is where we're sitting. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. The public had an opportunity to provide comment via email or voicemail. Any comments submitted in advance have been provided to committee members and will be linked in the meeting minutes. On today's agenda, there will be an opportunity to provide public comment at the end of the meeting. For those of you out there with us today, including all of our adoring fans in YouTube land, welcome. I will now go through and introduce all committee members who are participating here in person. Committee members, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Steve Barron.
Do I push this down?
No, you just speak into it.
Hello.
Hello, Steve. Ashley Case.
Hi.
Justin Young.
Hello.
Michael Totten.
Hello.
Joel Osgood.
Hello.
Christy Hurlbert.
Hi, everyone.
And Alicia Goldstein.
Hello.
Sophie Molinax is absent today. We also have our sustainability superheroes here, Bridget Herring,
Hello.
Chris Clark,
Hello.
and Kiara Boulan is absent today. Thank you, everybody. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud and do a vocal roll call for each vote. Additionally, I ask that committee members raise their hand to speak, and I will call upon you. Okay. First item on our agenda is approval of our May minutes. Are there any questions or comments about the May minutes? Hopefully everyone's had a chance to read them. If there are no questions or comments, will somebody make a motion to approve the minutes?
A motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Joel and Christy. And so we'll just take an up or down vote. All in favor of approving the May minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Moving right along, takes us to updates. These are our working group updates. We'll start with our waste reduction update to be given by Ashley Case.
Thanks, Tim. So for our last waste reduction working group, the Weirdos, as we're known, we revisited our goals for the year, and we really tried to center our goals around helping the work that a lot of the staff in the waste reduction department is already working on and is already doing a really great job on being very sustainable. They are putting out a new ad focused on not needing to bag the recyclables, and that's one thing that we can help with is kind of sharing those ads. And there's potential for working on a grant, the 2024 Community Waste Reduction and Recycling Grant. So that we'll be potentially reviewing this month. And we got the report on the single-use plastic campaign that Aurora will be talking about more, but it seems like it was a really successful campaign. And our main conversation really stemmed around the free store and if we would like to, if what our role is in, if we see that continuing. And I think that might be a conversation also to have with Jess and the new waste reduction manager, but if we are interested in seeing it continue, kind of talking about what our role is. One of the shortcomings of the free store is there was a lack of volunteers, and so if it's something that our group wants to see continue, than how much we feel like we can commit to volunteering during those free store events. So maybe that's something we could put on the agenda for future meetings to discuss if people are interested in seeing it move forward, or if people are interested in seeing it continue with us. And it might continue with the waste reduction people anyway, but they're fine tuning that. And I think it was a successful event, but more metrics need to be in place to like really measure the success of the event and to see how much was really kept out of the landfill. And questions were raised, well, was it even kept out of the landfill? Like, would people have just donated to other places? But I think there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily measured with just weight in terms of like building community and adding to community resilience. So I think it's be an interesting conversation to continue.
All right, thanks, Ashley. Is that
Yep.
full update?
Thank you.
Okay. We'll open it up for any questions for Ashley. Go for it, Justin.
How much funding is available through that grant that you mentioned? Just out of curiosity.
I would have to look. I want to say 35. Yeah, and it's mostly for advertisements around. Is that right, Steve? Did you review that? It was mostly.
Can't give you that level of detail. I just looked at the number.
Yeah. Okay. It looked like it was mostly for like stickers, signage, advertisements around like what's recyclable, what's not, keeping contamination out of the recycling stream, things like that.
Okay, so like really a PR focus
Yeah,
kind
and
of grant opportunity.
they're updating like signage on cans through like QR code stickers so that people can scan them and figure out like what I can and can't be putting in my recycling bin and that it's up to date.
It also includes mailers that go out to households. That's quite expensive. And if I'll just give a reminder to speak into the microphone so that people can hear online, that'd be great.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ashley? If not, we'll do our second working group update, Community and Climate Resilience by Michael Totten.
Thank you, Chairman Orman. Well, there were 3 parts to this, one of which I did, 2 of which remain unfinished. The first part, well, to reiterate, the last meeting, it was brought up that is there a possible conflict between our being a tree city and also advocating solar rooftop systems, and would they complement or clash? And so one thought was to reach out to the Urban Forester and the Forest Commission to do a presentation just raising the issue. So the first part was kind of updating the research on what is the situation. And after talking with quite a number of solar experts who've been at this for at least 30 years or more, their sense was that there is not a conflict as such unless you have an aggressive salesperson who is irresponsible in promoting panels when there's shading. But given the fact that we now are moving to microinverters, partial shading occurs quite frequently in a lot of panels that are installed, but it's not like it was years ago where you lose all the power if you shade just a part of the panels. They also felt that if you were to give priority, it would be over the trees rather than the solar panels, because while some solar sales companies point out that solar produces more than the tree in carbon, for example, reducing carbon, that fails to take into account that the micro benefits both in evapotranspiration, like one big tree is something like 4 air conditioning units in effectiveness, but also in the fact that if you have a tree canopy city, you actually are getting larger savings at the power plant. So if you have any fossil fuel power plants, it can avoid increasing the air conditioning loads in cities. And then the other thing with trees, of course, is that where you have a canopy, it cools cars down in hot weather to a point where it reduces the amount of vapors that continue to come off the car if it's overheated. So when you factor those in, it basically, if you have a responsible solar company that is taking those into consideration, there really shouldn't be any conflict. You may not have as many panels on your roof, but then again, you know, there's, right now, probably the priority of rooftops is in the commercial institutional sectors than individual rooftops. I mean, what would make more sense if the state would allow us to codify orientation of rooftops so that they can be solar capable, even if you don't put solar panels on now. That is an immense loss. It's been known since 1975, but our builders blocked it, and as my understanding, and we can't do anything about that, is my understanding at the local level. But that would make far greater sense, particularly with all the new building that's going on here. The second part, I exchanged many phone calls, but missing each other with Keith Aiken, the urban forester, so I wasn't able to have that conversation, and I'm still looking forward to talking with him. And then Sophie and I didn't talk about doing a presentation, but based on, I thought I'd see her today, and basically, based on the sharing of the information, I don't see a urgency in making a presentation, but I can follow up with Keith just so that we have established a liaison about this.
So just to give a little context, this was one of the things you put in your goals for the year, is that you wanted to give a presentation to the Urban Forestry Commission on the relationship between solar and trees. So that's how it came to be. And I've spoken with Keith, who's our urban forester, and said, so I can help you facilitate, if you want to do a presentation to Urban Forestry Commission, if you do want to do that whenever you're ready, I can help get that on the agenda.
It basically would be one where complementary rather than.
Right.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions for Michael? Nope. I think the heat has gotten to all of us. So that will take us to our third working group, which is stormwater and green infrastructure, given by Joel Osgood.
Thank you all. Not much to update in our group. The neighborhood matching grants, we're still continuing to track applicants in that regard. There was one applicant in Enka Village. They were trying to help out. We haven't heard much back from them, but we'll continue to keep y'all updated and informed about anything in the neighborhood matching grants program. We were also tracking with the stormwater fee study, and that got, I guess, put on ice for a little while the city of Asheville was hiring a new stormwater director. Our understanding is they have hired a new stormwater director, and perhaps we can resurrect said stormwater fee study, and possibly there's an opportunity for them to meet with our little subcommittee or with us once they get settled in. And I think the other thing that we're tracking is as the potential UDO updates occur in the next 12 to 18 months, hopefully, there might be an opportunity for us to advocate for any stormwater green infrastructure retrofit projects to potentially have a streamlined process through said permitting review. And that is all that we have in terms of an update, unless Tim or Alicia, you have anything to add.
No, Joel, thank you. Alicia? No. Any questions for Joel or our working group? All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your updates. That takes us to 2B, Sustainability Department update, which will be given by our director, Bridget Herring.
Great, thank you. So in your meeting agenda, I put together just a little something that has some updates from the city perspective, and I'm not going to go through it. Happy to answer questions. The one thing I'll bring to your attention to follow up on what Joel just mentioned is that our Planning and Urban Design Department is proposing to do some updates to our Unified Development Ordinance, and they gave a presentation to our Planning and Economic Development Council Committee, and so I linked the page to that in there if you want to look at the slides or watch the presentation. I've already been in conversation with Steph Dahl, who's our Planning and Urban Design Department Director, about how we're going to engage the boards and commissions through that process, and so already put it on her radar, your interest for that. And this comes as a result of requesting to do funding to have a consultant help us do a comprehensive update, and in lieu of that, staff is working on trying to take a phased approach to updating it over time. And so that's all in the presentation. And so that's some good news, I think, for this group. And then the other thing that's not in your memo, but that I wanted to let you know about, is that our fire department has created a new division for community risk reduction. We have Kelly Hines in the audience, who is the division chief of the Community Risk Reduction Group. So this is a new division under emergency management that's going to be helping our community work on resilience, like personal resilience, both in terms of climate vulnerabilities, but beyond, right? Looking at all the things that are out there. And so excited to see this new development in the city, and excited that Kelly's stepping into this role. So wanted to mention that for y'all. Any questions? Steve?
Yeah, on the Unified Development Ordinance, I think I took a quick look at the slides that you referenced, and if I recall, it indicates that, at least penciled in, we have a window in which to submit any comments and recommendations about proposed changes to the UDO, that in mid-January of '25, it indicated that advisory boards will attend a leadership summit to discuss priorities, and then late January '25, that's a 2-week window, advisory boards submit written recommendations on changes to the UDO. So I wonder how firm are those, and do we need to pencil or pen in these items on the calendar, and how are we going to make sure that we meet to finalize, draft any recommendations that we might have within that window?
Yeah, so I'm hoping that we'll be able to utilize our retreat as a way to like kind of get your priorities in order and flesh out kind of some of those things so that you'll be ready for the January meeting, not knowing exactly what's going to be on the agenda for that, but knowing that that's an opportunity for us to dig in a little bit deeper into like the priorities for the upcoming year. So hoping to get some more information from planning before we have our annual retreat, so that we can use some of that time to get prepared, and hopefully at that time I'll have some more concrete dates on how we'll be engaging. But I think I heard you say 2 dates in January,
Yeah.
but I think we're going to look at doing 2 times a year, one in January, one in July.
Okay. The
Uh-huh.
whatever it was said mid-January.
Right.
I guess all those advisory boards meet and have the summit and
Right.
talk about their priorities, and then late January, it says
Right.
the advisory boards are supposed to submit their written recommendations on possible.
Right, well, I think that'll be on like topics. That's not necessarily going to be on technical changes, is my,
So then what is July?
so I think that might be some technical changes that are coming back, but I don't know. This is a new process
Okay.
that is
Okay,
developing.
all right. Well, do we need to worry about how logistically we get any written recommendations in a 2-week window in the latter part of January?
Maybe, but I would say we could save those worries for a later date when we have more information, would be my recommendation. And that I'm hoping that we can use some of our retreat time to prepare for
Okay.
that, to alleviate some of that
Yeah.
tension.
Good, thank you.
Bridget, thank you for that update. In your knowledge, is the UDO, is it limited to certain key areas, or is it sort of wide open for input?
I mean, I think doing a piecemeal update, we're going to have to limit the scope on some level to be able to work through some of the things. So like the first tranche of recommendations is really focused on housing. So that doesn't mean that there's not going to be touches in there that are priorities, but I think it is going to have to be limited in some fashion to areas to address. Otherwise, we're going to be like pulling on different strings all over the place. So I think it is going to require a focused, phased approach.
So it sounds like it may not be worthwhile for us to initiate UDO changes in our working group. We should wait to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I
from
think
planning.
we've been trying to keep track of like the like wish list that is kind of evolved over time. And so I think it's important to understand what those things are so that that can be, see how that's relevant to the piece of the conversation. And then I think we kind of help advocate and unfold it, you know, in those ways. But I don't think there's anything wrong with continuing to make sure that we know what that list of items is so that as opportunities come up, we've identified all the areas.
Okay.
Does
But it
that make
sounds like,
sense?
I think so, and it sounds like a year from now will be the opportunity to actually discuss.
6 months,
Okay, 6 months, January, and then July.
right, January. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Bridget, do you have a sense of what your priorities are right now, like at first glance? Or is that something you would like us to help prioritize?
I think that that's a process that we should go through.
Retreat.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Okay, any other questions for Bridget?
Just a quick one, on this fire department risk reduction, how do we keep up with or find out more information about how that's developing? I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but it was a new item, and I am of interest in it.
So I just started July 1st,
Okay.
and I was on vacation that week. So it was really my first week, and reached out to some areas that I thought, hey, I wanted to learn more about what this group is concerned about and how I can plug in. Overall, it's about reducing risk within the community and trying to grow the resilience out of that. 911 is very reactive when you want somebody from the fire department, and my purpose and goal is to be more proactive.
That's great.
So for all our YouTube listeners out there, the answer to Steve's question was that stay tuned. The division is just forming and doesn't have a project page or anything of that nature yet, but will. And that the idea is to be more proactive versus reactive in terms of responding to emergencies, but getting people prepared ahead of time.
Good. Super.
Okay, very good. If there's nothing else on updates, that takes us to number 3, old business, 5 minutes ahead of schedule. And 3A is Less Plastic Asheville, the After Action Report by Aurora Wynn, City of Asheville AmeriCorps Resilience Project Coordinator. Welcome, Aurora.
Howdy, everybody. Good to see you all again. I'm Aurora Wynn. I'm the Resilience Project Coordinator from the North Carolina Climate Action Corps, serving with the Sustainability Department for the year. And I'm here to talk about the end of campaign for the Less Plastic Asheville campaign. If you'd hit my first slide, Chris. So this is just a really quick recap, since you're all pretty familiar with this project. For our YouTube listeners, the Less Plastic Asheville campaign was a 15-week campaign that started back in February. That was a combination of weekly social media posts, twice weekly tabling events all around town that were all really geared towards engaging residents about reducing their own single-use plastic consumption voluntarily. Next slide, please. So our key takeaways that we've learned from this campaign are, first of all, that creating that much social media content and tabling for between 4 and 10 hours per week is extremely resource intensive, and that it really would not have been possible with the current capacity of the team had I not been there. That's not really meant to pat myself on the head, more so to just like make a note about capacity in general and how time consuming creating social media content can be. The multifaceted approach of using both social media and face-to-face engagement was wonderful. It really helped us to reach people on a number of platforms and really increase our engagement. I think you'll be really excited by the metrics on the next slide. Videos versus infographics were the two kinds of social media content that we produced. And videos, while they garner significantly higher levels of engagement on social media, also take considerably more effort to produce, more than twice as much in both categories. So the average views for a video in our campaign was over 3,000 views, whereas infographics got about 1,200, but it also took about 17 hours to create each video versus about 8 hours to create each infographic. The tabling engagement supported opportunities to, in person, provide personalized resources and education for plastic reduction. This mostly was in the form of reusable tote bags that we gave out to folks, but was also just information, ideas for ways that people could reduce plastic in their life in easy ways. Next slide, please, Chris. All right, so here are the numbers. They're exciting ones, in my opinion. We engaged over 57,000 people through the campaign in total. That's a combination of social media and in person. The majority of that is social media engagement. Through the campaign, 565 residents took the Pass On Plastic Pledge, which was a pledge to reduce their own single-use plastic consumption. They had 7 ways they could commit to do that, and most folks selected some level of all of them. There were 51 bingo challenge participants. This was less bingo participation than we had hoped for. It turns out if you ask people to post a bunch of stuff on their social media for you, you get maybe less response. We got to talk to 1,752 residents face-to-face at those tabling events. That was my favorite part of the whole campaign. I really enjoyed having those one-on-one conversations and getting to meet people where they were at. And at those tabling events, we also distributed 1,453 reusable tote bags. Next slide, please, Chris. This campaign was the final chapter of the city's single-use plastic reduction project that started all the way back in 2018. It feels like a really nice bow to put on the whole thing, so I'm pretty happy about it. And if you would like to know more about how the campaign went, see further metrics and a great more deal of detail about how we created the campaign, you can follow the link that's in these slides for the full report. Does anybody have any questions? That's it. Last slide, Chris.
Thank you, Aurora. Great.
Before we take questions, I do just want to say that this was an amazing feat, and not only was it labor intensive, it was a labor of love because it was the city's first social media campaign at this time, so there was a lot of growing pains and a lot of learning for our organization that Aurora helped shepherd us through. So I would just like to stop and give her a round of applause for this one.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you very much.
Was that the first social media campaign of any city department or just sustainability?
In the city of Asheville, it was the first one for the organization. So yeah, there was a lot
For the entire city?
for the entire city of Asheville.
We created a separate internal lessons learned in case other departments want to do a campaign like this in the future.
Great, pioneer.
Any other questions?
I had a question about the pledges and if there's any kind of follow-up in terms of making commitments. How does that work? Or
No, actually, we very specifically promised residents that we would not be chasing them down to see how many plastic bags they've consumed after making the pledge. It's an honor system. But most of the folks who took the pledge seemed really excited about it. They would find a few things on there that maybe they were already doing, and were happy to say that they already did. And then there'd be something on that pledge that maybe they weren't doing yet that seemed like a good idea. And so we got to see quite a band of people maybe taking that step for the first time, and also people just taking the next step in the right direction.
yeah, thanks. Any other questions?
You said this was kind of the final wrap-up of the single-use, or the Plastic-Free Asheville campaign, but, so we won't see any more plastic stuff anytime soon, or it's nothing plastic-related is on the agenda currently? Is that how?
Right, so I gave a presentation to Environment and Safety in March that talked about what is the life after an organizational work plan item, and what we've talked about what was in our Less Plastic Asheville proclamation, if you recall, was taking a look at this through the solid waste master plan to see what additional steps could be taken, but that the sustainability department won't be leading a project in this space.
Thank you for work.
Thank you.
Steve?
I have a few thoughts. I want to echo that I thought this was a great effort.
Thank you, Steve.
Particularly under the circumstances where where the city has limited authority to do something in this area. I especially like and you indicated that it was very meaningful, these some 1,500 tabling conversations that you had.
1,752.
Yes. I wouldn't want to take that away. And distributing bags, and I trust that you put electronic tags on those bags so that we can see how often they went back to the grocery store. Or
Not officially.
what, okay. But I really do want to say that this was a valiant effort because, you know, there are, as in many of these challenges, where you're trying to align individual behavior with the public good or the common interest, it's always challenging, and it's doubly challenging here because the legislature, in its wisdom, midway stepped in and clarified or answered the unanswered question about whether we have authority to actually regulate and restrict, and the answer was no, so there's no authority. And then, in addition, I think, as I understood, the city itself disclaimed for I think, concerns about discrimination, that providing voluntary incentives to businesses was not an option on the table, like as simply as recognizing that, you know, some restaurant or some grocery store was doing a great job and gets a badge of honor or something like that. So we were left with trying to persuade individual residents to change their behavior, and that's a tough one. So I think you guys did everything possible, and it would be a shame if we let it drop forever because it's such.
You just pointed your finger at me.
It's such a,
With the word shame, in fact.
So anyway, I just wanted to say that, and then the one tiny question I had is I noted in the report that the feedback from this, 75% of recipients favored this, and 25% were critical or had negative reviews. What was behind that 25? Do you recall what was behind that 25% who didn't?
I do. I think I would first say that a 75% positive rating on our social media is almost unprecedentedly good. That we don't normally get that much positive support for anything that we do as the city. So that's a good thing. Of the 25%, it was something along the lines of like, our tax dollars are paying for this kind of sentiment, but the majority of the sentiment was, this is a great idea, it's very not pushy, it's providing resources and information for free to residents, it's non-discriminatory, it does not force decisions on businesses. That was far more the majority of the sentiment from people who responded on social media. And to your point about discriminating against businesses, something I wanted to add that wasn't in the report was that we tabled at a large variety of businesses, both geographically and in terms of the type of grocery store that we went to, so that we reached a diverse audience of residents to provide equitable access to all of this.
Great.
Thank you, Steve.
Good. Great.
I have a follow-up question. Yeah, in terms, I think a bit riffing off you, Steve, is there any opportunity that you see for the city to lead by example in reducing plastics internally? I know, some meetings I've been to in the city, there's styrofoam and plastic bags, and can we do anything at least within the city to reduce and lead by example in city buildings and city facilities?
I think
What's
that's
the
what Bridget,
possibility there?
I think that's what Bridget was referring to in terms of like the master plan and maybe looking more internally. I think that that's something that's already somewhat being done in the building and our municipal buildings already, but that there's a question of like what more could we be doing? So yes, is the short answer. I do believe that that's the next step.
Is it in the master
Through
plan?
the solid waste master plan.
City buildings?
There's
Great.
a portion of that that's supposed to look at city operations and plans and policy opportunities within that.
Great. Thanks.
Anyone else? If not,
Thank
thanks,
you so
Aurora.
much.
Great job. Appreciate you. That takes us to item 3B, Elevate Asheville Project Update. Kiara is not here, and I understand Bridget will be giving the update.
That's right, I'm pinch hitting, so be kind. Kira is home with some family that needs her loving attention, so I'm here to talk about Elevate AVL, which is a project that's part of our Climate Justice Initiative. And I also have Reggie Tidwell in the audience, who is the consultant that we're working on as part of this project, and he's going to come up and help me out as well. So just want to reiterate some key takeaways is that this builds off of our original climate justice work. It's going to bring out a climate action toolkit, and this engagement is seeking to try to co-create materials. So whereas in the past we've had a personal action guide that was created by NEMAC, who is great, scientist, lovely, put together some smart stuff, we want to build some materials with community so that they resonate with our community and are what they want to hear and what they want to see. And that the next steps in this work will continue to be an iterative process that's based on the feedback that we continue to get, and that the work will continue to evolve. So just giving you a little background of how we got here, I'll step back in some bullets that didn't make it in here, but in 2018 is when we did our vulnerability assessment. And then in 2019 was when we developed the personal action guide. And then it wasn't until 2020 that City Council declared a state of emergency, and that's the first time that we see equity brought into our climate goals, and talking about how we understand that marginalized communities, and often communities of color, can be the most vulnerable and most impacted by the effects of climate change. And so that's kind of what kicked off the Climate Justice Initiative, in which we did some story circles, these listening and learning. We developed our Climate Justice Index and a climate justice screening tool, which is something that we can apply to city projects to help incorporate it in the work that we do. And so that last part, that screening tool, and some of the additional tools we've developed, is some of the internal work that we've been doing over the past couple of years to help understand how we can better use this information to inform the work that we do and the outcomes that we're trying to reach. And then in 2024, we developed and launched Elevate AVL, which was to re-engage externally with our community and to inform this personal action guide revision. So the only other thing I would take is a little nugget away from this, is that the idea to revise this guide came out of that work that we did in 2020 and 2022. And as the city process works very slowly, and turns out, we're developing it in 2024. And so I think that's just something that's going to be a continual challenge as we get ideas, the way that we can put them into implementation. There's going to be a little bit of lag time, and how do we continue to build the trust in the community and the communication to stick with us through our slow process. It's just going to be a challenge as we work through this. So again, building on the work to date, these are some of the key recommendations that we heard through the listening and learning sessions with community leaders and the story circles. And the ones that are bolded are ones that were really focused in on the Elevate AVL. And this is a recap. This is on our website. This is when we did our story circles and our listening and learning. What we wanted to do was have the community define these terms for us, right? So not using a Harvard University developed definition of what climate equity or climate resilience is, which there's nothing wrong with that, but we wanted to understand what it meant to our community. And this is what drives the outcomes that we're looking for. So whenever we're doing work through our Climate Justice Initiative, we're trying to look at, are people more informed, engaged, and well-resourced? Are they part of the decision-making process, right? What is the sovereignty that they have? How are we learning from them and responding to the needs that have been lifted up, and not trying to recreate or re-ask a new question that we already have the answer to? So again, here's the current work, this awesome graphic that Reggie helped us, or Reggie designed, let's be honest here. Not helped, we helped you give some feedback. So the way that the structure of the Elevate AVL came to be is that there was an advisory committee, which Joel sits on, which is lovely. And then we had engagement agents, which were paid members of the community to engage with their kind of groups, to have some on-the-ground conversations, have conversations in trusted spaces with trusted people, to get input that would help inform what we lift up, what we prioritize, what we move forward. And then that ultimate review will be the Climate Action Toolkit, which is a revision of this personal action guide. And what we've really heard is that they want tangible household, community level actions that people can put in their hands, people can put into place that help make this not feel so heavy, right? That can help benefit people right now. And so, as I said before, all this input is going to help us see what the next steps are. So sometimes it can be challenging when we don't have like a, here is our roadmap to get here. But our job sometimes is to hold the space and convene the conversation and then let the next steps come up from the community. And so sometimes that means we have to be patient and wait. We kind of have to work through some uncertainty to like figure out what comes to light. And I'm going to turn it over to Reggie.
Everybody, Reggie Tidwell.
You can move that up too.
Come all the way up here? I don't think so.
Just so you don't have to hunch over.
Yeah, so thanks, Bridget, for the backstory. I guess a few points. Bridget said all the fun stuff, but working with the engagement agents was really awesome because obviously if you're going to create a resource for the community needs to be able to somehow weigh in on that, so at least we know we're producing a resource that's going to be useful to them. And so that's why we created that position of the engagement agents, so they can go out and engage with community members and find out exactly what resources they were missing, what misconceptions were out there. So that was one of our key objectives there. And then, of course, working with the one and only Joel Osgood with our advisory committee, that was super awesome because those guys met every month and were able to give us some really expert level advice on what kind of information is going to go in the guide. I designed this guide specifically to feel like it was for the people, so it could feel a little more like a movement, something a little more grassroots. I think ultimately the distribution is going to be like a Mountain Express or something where we have them available in batches for people to grab and take and keep, with the ultimate goal being that they will make their way back to the website on the city's on the sustainability section of the city's website so that they can find additional resources. The beauty of the web, obviously, is that those resources can continue to grow, while what we have in print just gives us these little teasers that takes them for more information. You can go to the next slide. As part of this campaign, we're producing social media assets that can also act as teasers, things that can also push people back to the website, remind them of the guide, but most importantly, create some engagement, continue that movement, get people talking about the climate. I think as we all know, climate justice is not a personal, single endeavor. The more we are engaging with our communities and talking about it, the more we can actually have some progress. And so that is my biggest objective is to get people talking, engaging with their community members. And so we're producing assets that will help foster those conversations, posters that also then lead people back to the website, and then maybe has a list of places where they can pick up the guide. I guess in moving forward, so we are at a stage in the guide where we are at like sort of the first draft stage, and so we are kind of going through, culling through, refining, taking the information that we got from the engagement agents, and then making sure that that content reflects what the people are saying they need to see and want to see. And then we'll have another draft, which then will have a round of actual, people, I guess a committee, so to speak, to go through?
The Climate Resilience Working Group has been working on this, and the engagement agents will have opportunity for that.
Perfect. So we'll pull the engagement agents back in so they can see the work that they, help produce, reflect it, and then to sort of make sure it checks out. And then I think we are probably looking at Q4 for printing of this year, not your Q4. I learned that you guys have a different, but I'd say sometime in the October, November range, being able to be ready to go to print and get this thing distributed. So that's where we are. We're kind of in this holding pattern where we're refining the content and getting it ready for review. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
We had one more slide in the deck. I don't know if
Oh, was it? No, that one's not for me. That one's for,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah, that's for Bridget.
Reggie
make me
kind
do
of
that one.
spoke to all this, so it's all good. We're
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
So we're all done, and
Yeah,
we'll
we're
open the
good.
questions. All right, thank you, Reggie.
Did you
Thank
guys have any
Bridget.
questions? No?
I have one question.
Yeah, go for
Just
it.
following up, how effective was the engagement agents and like whether separating out more money in the future for them to lead specific actions? Do you think that that might be helpful as something to advocate for, is having individuals in the community kind of take a leading role if they were given some money?
Yeah, no, 100%. And what was your first question? How effective
Well,
were they?
Yeah, like based on your experience working with them, like if you were to
They
think
were a
about the
godsend.
evolution of this program.
I'll say that much. They were a godsend. We had 5 really amazing women who were from different parts of our community. It's a very diverse group, so really good representation. But one of the things that was really awesome to see was they were all very engaged and very much starters. We gave them as much as we could, and they were able to cross-pollinate with one another, get lots of resources together really quickly. They were very communicative. I couldn't have asked for a better group of people. And it's my advice that we do continue having an engagement agent program and having members of the community sort of act as liaisons between this project and our community. So yeah, absolutely.
Steve?
Oh, hey, Steve.
Hey, great presentation, and this is really, really important work, I think, because the climate is changing, and I don't know that very much is going to be done to change where things are going in that direction. So what we can do is respond to it as best we can.
Yeah.
I did have one question about this line. The top line says that the Resilience Working Group, as a next step, would have an opportunity to review. Do you know what the approximate timeline is for that?
Well, I'll let Bridget speak because I don't know if there's something on the calendar, but like I said, we'll probably be at that stage in somewhere probably around October. We have a lot of content to still get through and to refine. So I would imagine that around October, we'll be shooting late September, early October. We'll have something that at least internally, we can decide if it's ready for that step.
That kind of, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the horse won't have left the barn by that point. There'll be opportunity to give.
There's going to be one round of input feedback where we'll have a draft out there and people can, you've already given some input throughout the process so far about kind of what goes in there, but once Reggie does his magic and puts something together, there'll be an opportunity, like he said, for the engagement agents to check in to make sure that we're displaying accurately, right? Like the input that we got, because there's we have to always keep checking in to make sure that that's we're still in tune with one another, and then there'll be an opportunity for the working group to provide input to the revision. So if you wanted to change the entire thing, that's can of worms is closed. So if that's what you're asking, if you want to come in and say, I want to re-envision this guide to be something wildly different, I'd say that's out of scope, but what is in scope is in terms of like the languaging, some of how we're displaying it and things of that nature.
And keeping in mind too that this guide it really is like a first step. It's not meant to be a comprehensive everything you need to know forever is in here. Like, it's essentially going to be a valuable resource to have at home, you know, and where you keep like where you probably used to keep your white pages and yellow pages kind of thing. But ultimately, pointing people back to the website, which can be dynamic
Right.
and can grow and change.
So it's going to be both the product is going to be both a print guide and online
And online, yeah, yeah,
with the links to a million places.
absolutely.
Great.
Correct,
Great.
and that's the idea, is to have something that's, you know, you can hand out, and also a way that you can tease it out, so that you don't have to give people the entire guide. Like, I think that's part of the problem with the one that we have now, is that it's like, here you go.
I
and
try to do
like-
too much.
Yeah, and so this is gonna be able to be teased out into different pieces, so you don't have to give somebody the whole thing if that's not what they're
Yeah.
looking for.
Yeah.
And that also gives us the opportunity to continue to build additional resources to go along with that, whether that is like community-led workshops on a specific thing, whether that is some like videos or content that's like, you know, stories from our local community members, how they're impacted by a certain climate threat in their own neighborhood, so that we can put a personal face to what we're doing. Or, you know, saying, you really want to nerd out on this, like, here's a way you can deep dive down here. But we want to have it to be approachable and not start with the nerd aspect, start with the like, let's bring you in and teach you about this, and then if you want to continue down that path, there's trails you can take, right?
Yeah, and one thing just to add to what Bridget was saying, or really just jumping off, she mentioned like conversations with community members. That's another thing that I didn't mention, but it's super exciting. We'll have these case studies in the guide. They'll just be in text form that basically are accounts of people's own experience with climate change. But also on the website, we'll have videos. So I've been doing video interviews with some community members, and those will make their way onto the website. So it's kind of nice that the community will sort of see themselves reflected in their neighbors, their friends on the website.
One final quick thought. One thing I did like about the old guide, wasn't perfect, but its title, Climate Resilience Personal Action Guide. And I kind of looked at, you know, the way at least the cover looks here and the theme that's used here, which is Elevate AVL, and I'm kind of scratching my head about that. It's not, to me, it doesn't seem to be as directly communicative about what the whole thing is about.
I mean, it's spelled out in the guide, but ultimately, we went with Elevate AVL. It's not only about climate resiliency, but it's really about getting the community to take those actions themselves as a community. And so through that process, we're elevating together. We are, you know, having these conversations. We are giving resources to one another to help us be able to, like for instance, I personally was affected because I had my 4th basement flood just earlier this year. And the things that I learned from that experience and the things that I did to mitigate that have been very helpful to other people that have been having similar things. So we all, in a sense, feel elevated.
Yeah, all great. Elevate AVL just seemed a bit abstract to me. It didn't communicate the exact.
Keep in
kind of
mind, we're
things
trying to
saying.
produce a grassroots movement, so it can't be too literal, you know? To do that, you want to create something that helps people. Maybe it's not, I wouldn't say it's entirely vague, but ultimately, if it feels like something people can get behind and support, that doesn't feel too tech talk to industry speak. Industry speak bores people. That first guy, no offense, I don't know who did it, wasn't approachable. You use too much industry speak and you turn people off that go the other way, and then you produce something that doesn't get used.
Right.
So our hope here, obviously, is to produce something that is highly functional, highly distributable.
This is why we hired Reggie, because he knows about these things. But Joel was also, I don't know if you want to talk about the process of naming, because it was like a group.
It was a group effort, yeah.
Yeah, the process, and I really appreciate and admire, Reggie, how much you were integrated into the work that had already been done.
Yeah, thanks.
And, you know, extracting out, like, okay, how do we motivate an audience that's beyond people that are thinking about and focused on climate change? And we had a lot of discussions just about the brand and this whole narrative that, you know, what's happening at a neighborhood watershed scale, and how do you pull in more people into this dialogue? And I really appreciate how much energy and time and just dialogue that we had in our advisory committee. And then this idea to pull in these engagement agents, and at the time, I'm like, what is this? What does all this mean? But really, this whole effort, to me, felt like more community organization in terms of this climate equity, climate justice. And in my experience, I think that's where this is so impactful. And we can take that science-based response and then combine that with community organizing, and then create something that we can move forward with and have something that's approachable, where the audience is much bigger than those people like us that are already passionate about, care about, and concerned about this issue. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, it feels a little abstract, but really it is about, you know, elevating each other, pulling in a larger audience into this topic. And I think that as the filter, as we review this guide, is a really important filter. That it's like, okay, what things can I do in my existence, personally and or within the community, to have a positive impact within this entire sphere.
Yeah.
So yeah, good work.
Agreed.
I feel humbled to be a part of that journey.
Likewise.
If I can just add one little thing to that before you go. So Elevate AVL is like the big umbrella of which we can start to build out like all of our external programming and resources under this climate justice initiative. And so we're talking about the guide transforming from a guide into a toolkit. And so we can continue to add resources to it as it gets further developed. Like, unfortunately, Reggie doesn't work for the city of Asheville, so he's not going to be with us forever to continue to iterate. So but he's creating this framework that then we can help continue to develop resources underneath that are more action-oriented and toolkit, if that helps. Thanks, Michael.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there will be a menu item, Elevate AVL, on the website, which, as we talked about, will continue to grow. And as we learn what the community needs and what better serves the community, that content will be reflected down the line on that website. Thanks, guys.
You got another question.
It's part comment, part question.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's to be addressed to Reggie or Bridget or the committee or maybe no one. Is this an information toolkit, not a prioritizing of needs for dealing with inequitable climate emergency situations? And maybe be specific. The people that are most, fortunately, we're not in a situation like Phoenix. We might have read the Atlantic Monthly article where homeless people were dying on the streets because of the heat exposure, 120-degree weather. And people are having their electricity shut off because their bills are they're in arrears, and they don't have any air conditioning or fans. I mean, that's true climate emergency, and it hits the worst of the most that are inequitable situations. Here we have some time, although I'm sure those who are living in multifamily dwellings that are not heat-proof are facing very high temperatures in their apartments, can't afford perhaps to deal with the situation, are in a split incentive where the owner maybe won't upgrade to a heat pump for the whole situation to keep their bills down, where they go outside and where there's less trees in their environment than there are in the wealthier parts of the city, so they don't even have the cooling effect. Is this tool going to help in answering those types of pressing questions where they have no money to deal with it? They are at the mercy of city agencies deciding whether they're going to plant a tree and maintain the tree, and questions like that. Oh.
Absolutely appreciate the question. And to that, I will say that is precisely the part of the process that we're in. We are prioritizing what information needs to go in the guide. Just so you know, and I don't know if you saw the table of contents, there are actually sections broken down to the climate emergencies, how to prepare, how to protect yourself. Those kinds of questions will be answered in there, and we are right in the middle of refining, reviewing, figuring out what is the most relevant information. And that also came from our engagement agents. That's some of that information that's answering those exact questions that you asked. Yeah.
Because I assume that means, do you have the urban forester involved, I assume, for prioritizing tree planting, or do you have the utility involved?
The
or not?
way that it's gonna like bubble up into city work is taking this information and helping to deploy it through our partnerships with like the Community Risk Reduction Group, through the Urban Forest Master Plan, through the implementation of the Recreate Asheville Plan, through the Community Upfit Program. Like, we're working in collaboration with every department in the city, and so that work is going to be done based on what that opportunity is there. You know, this is, you know, but what we want to understand is, what does the community want? Because the city going and designing something and giving it to people is not the solution.
I know that. I mean, Detroit had a disaster planting trees in underserved
Right, so part of
communities, and they
this is
resented
like,
it.
we
Yeah.
gotta go slow and build this trust and capacity that the community's willing to share this information with us and work through our process to be able to deliver on that, which, as I said before, is gonna be a continual challenge of this work. And I just wanna give a shout out to the engagement agents. A lot of them have not always had great experiences working with the city as an organization, and they've really put everything into it, and I so appreciate that openness, giving that time, and lifting this issue up in our local communities. But like, it's gonna take a minute, because I can't just say, oh, these are multifamily units with people who are on fixed income, and we're gonna go give them all window air conditioner unit. That's the government saying, we know what you need, and here's the solution for you, versus, you know, co-creating what that looks like, and that's just going to be a time-consuming process.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I was not talking at all about we know
Okay.
what the answer is. I know there's enough government programs that have been disasters that we want to avoid that. But I also know that I've been working on this for 50 years, and all these issues that we're addressing today were known 50 years ago. And so getting prioritized results has got to be an integrated part at some point. And I don't know how much longer we're going to gather information, but other cities have already gathered the information from a similar type of inequitable situation, and we can certainly look and see what worked, what didn't work. And
Right, I think we're gathering information and we're trying to respond to it and lift it up. Like, that's the process that we're going through.
Yeah, and Michael, keep in mind too that not every community member finds ease in working with city government. And I think that's a big part of it. So we're in this sort of trust building, trust repairing stage. And so as that process is happening, there's some softening, there's some trust. We've seen that transformation throughout this process. One of the engagement agents is from a community that has felt underserved by government. And I think to have her actually really shift during this process was phenomenal. And so we have to be careful with how we tread forward so that we get the right information to put in this resource so that it is valuable. But trust me, we're all asking ourselves all those same questions. So, thanks.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you, Reggie. Well, out with the old and in with the new, that takes us to new business. 4A, Bountiful Cities and Asheville-Buncombe Food Policy Council FY24 contract update with local folk hero, my neighbor and fellow dog walker, Kathy Cleary. Bountiful Cities Outreach Coordinator. Welcome, Kathy.
Hi, thank you for that introduction, Tim. And thanks for having me here today. As Tim said, I am the outreach coordinator for Bountiful Cities. And for folks who might not know, Bountiful Cities is an urban agriculture organization focused on long-term food security through hyper-local food production and education. So, and today I'm going to focus on talking to y'all about two of our programs, the Community Garden Network and the Asheville Buncombe Food Policy Council, that we have a city contract with to move forward our work and our collaborative work with the city. So next slide, please. So here are some of the actions that we planned for the last fiscal year 2024. And I'm not going to read through this list, but they focus on education and access to fresh food and on outreach, reaching out to folks who might not have access to fresh food in their neighborhoods for a multitude of reasons. Next slide. So the first sort of directive that we have is to work to maintain and engage in the city's edible parks. And so we collaborate with community members to coordinate and maintain 3 different edible parks throughout the city that are on city-owned property. And the first one I will tell you about is the George Washington Carver Edible Park, which if you haven't been, it's really, really close by. It's right across Charlotte Street on the pedestrian bridge. So if you have a few minutes after this meeting, maybe go check it out. Next slide. We were actually able to do an extensive inventory this year of all of the plants in that edible park and identify needs through our work with community members in the city of Asheville. Next slide. The West Asheville Community Garden and Edible Park got a makeover this year thanks to our engagement with community members. The food forest that's on a hillside next to the baseball field there was planted probably about 10 years ago. And we were put in charge of maintenance just a few years ago. And next slide. This year, we got community members involved in some much needed weeding and mulching and again, inventory of plants and new plantings. Next slide. Also, in the West Asheville Park, there is a sweet little set of raised beds put in by our partnership with the Democratic Socialists of America, and they run this little community garden down there. And they take the food to free fridges and to local food pantries. Next slide. The Tempe Avery Edible Park is in the Montford community, and we were able to engage with community members through some edible plant walks. We did 2 of those this year, and they were so popular. We had 40 people come out to each of those, 40 plus people to the second one, to just walk around and look at what's there. And our local expert, Mark Williams, is the person who was leading folks in these edible plant walks. Next slide. And more engagement through, this is a little bit of a citizen science thing, our Asheville Edibles map, where people get to use a form that was created to input edibles that they see throughout the city. And can anybody identify what is in this slide? Yes, Christy, you're right. Those are service berries. And those were put into the Asheville Edibles map by a community member. Input inputted into the Asheville Edibles map by a community member. And we, in partnership with the city, thank you, Aurora, worked on some IT issues this year with the Asheville Edibles map. Next slide. The Community Garden Network also is engaged in education and outreach through a multitude of different free workshops that we put on throughout the year. We did 11 this past year. Oftentimes they're held in a community garden. This is the Elder and Sage Community Garden in downtown Asheville, and one of their community members is leading a cooking workshop. Next slide. We have a seed starting workshop, and in this slide, there's also that West Asheville Park is featured again because we did a collaborative workshop with the American Chestnut Foundation and planted a few American chestnuts in the food forest down there. Next slide. Outreach is also about building community, so we hold community potlucks and meetups. And in this one, our Community Garden Network coordinator, Tyrone, is giving a little workshop instruction in addition to having a potluck. Next slide. So our potlucks and meetups often have an educational element, and Chris Parker led one. Inoculating mushroom logs was the topic of that one. Next slide. Oh boy, you guys get a special treat. Our community garden tour happened, has happened for the past 3 summers and happened this past Sunday. And we have hot off the press, Christy's husband actually produced this video, so we can watch that real quick. If it works, I hope so, fingers crossed. As you can see, there's some local celebrities in our video. So I just love that because it gives you a sense of the community garden tour. It's a tour and a tasting, and it's really meant to engage folks who might not otherwise come out to a garden. And all of the gardens are food-producing gardens within the city. And so we really want to highlight and uplift that work, and the feedback that we've gotten is pretty phenomenal. Next slide. Also in terms of outreach and engagement, the Community Garden Network puts out a newsletter once a month in English and Spanish. Next slide. And I'm sorry I'm moving through this as quickly as I can. And this next part is about the Asheville Buncombe Food Policy Council, and my colleague put together this part and was not able to be here today to present about it, so I'm going to do my best. Next slide. I actually have been involved with the Food Policy Council since its inception in 2011. This slide gives you a little bit of background on the Food Policy Council. And the mission really is to get policy in place so that we can be growing more food within the city and people have access to more fresh food. Next slide. So in terms of our highlights for this year for the Food Policy Council, we have been part of the WNC Food Justice Planning Initiative, which is now named the WNC Food Systems Coalition. And we're working on starting a new regional food council as part of that. We provided leadership and administrative support for the group Food Waste Solutions, WNC, and partnered with East End, Valley Street, and Deaverview neighborhoods to produce some emergency food planning and preparedness projects. Next slide. And this slide just sort of outlines what happened with those emergency food preparedness plans with the East End, Valley Street, and Deaverview communities. And this echoes a little bit what Reggie was talking about in terms of engaging with neighborhood leaders. We really leaned upon the leaders in these neighborhoods to engage with their neighbors, to work on how they can have systems in place to be prepared when a food emergency happens, which also is oftentimes a climate emergency. Next slide. And this is just some next steps for that work for the coming year. Next slide. And in terms of food waste solutions, this is very similar to the Asheville-Buncombe Food Policy Council in that it is made up of a multitude of businesses, nonprofit organizations, individuals, and industry leaders that are all working towards food waste reduction and food waste solutions. And we are the convener of these groups. As you may know, if you've ever worked in community, which it looks like you are, you need a convener and someone to do administrative work. So that's our role within this group. Next slide. And we did some pretty amazing things this year as a group of all these different organizations in terms of food waste reduction. We had several quarterly networking events. We like to hold them at breweries. It's a really great place for people to come and learn. We had a really incredible Food Waste Solutions Summit drawing over 100 participants from all over the region, actually, back in November, and several of you were involved in that, the planning and implementation. And then Taste It, Don't Waste It more recently in April, which brought together people and chefs highlighting food that might otherwise get wasted. And that is all I have for you today. So, any questions?
Exciting.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Well, thanks so much.
Well, I have a couple of questions.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay. Okay, I'll come back.
In terms of the city funding to Bountiful Cities, you have many different programs. Is it designated just for emergency food preparedness or is it general use?
Yes. So our contract is to work on all of the things that I highlighted in this presentation. Okay. So our contract supports those free workshops that I mentioned. They're free to community members, but they're not free to produce. So, we have the Community Garden Network coordinators who engage with instructors and get all the materials and the place and all of that kind of thing to make those workshops happen. And the edible plant walk that drew over 40 people was one of those workshops. So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I did have a question about the edibles map too.
Yeah.
It's on GIS, is it open source or anyone can edit and add something or?
Yes, there is a Google form that folks need to fill out in order to be able to add something to the map, because it's pretty complicated. My understanding, the city of Asheville actually does the IT part of it for us, and we manage that Google form. So I think that it's complex to add something to the map, and so we don't want to further complexify it by having a bunch of people do it. Oh, that'd be great, thanks.
Oh, hold up. If you're going to speak to that, you got to come to the microphone. But what I would say is that Aurora just organized a service learning day with the rest of her AmeriCorps fellows to go out and verify all the places on the map, because what we don't want to have happen is have GIS coordinates that aren't right, or to have an edible that's been removed or like inaccurately labeled, because if people are going to depend on it as an information source, we have to have some kind of, quality check on the data so that people can use it in that fashion. And so the Google form is the way that people can add edibles, but then there's a check with how Bountiful Cities gives it to us, and we put it into our map through our system so that we can maintain some kind of quality control on it. And so Aurora is also helping us develop like an SOP so we can utilize volunteers on somewhat of a regular cadence to make sure we're verifying the edibles so that it can be, we can have confidence that people are using it, aren't going somewhere and not finding a service berry or whatnot.
Or it's misidentified as something poisonous or something.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's good.
So anything that gets submitted by Tim is obviously needs to be double checked.
Do we know how many people are using that map?
There was, I think, 10 or 11 new inputs in the past year, so not a lot, but we did get some
viewing on the more
viewing that would
side.
be,
Yeah, do we know
I
a
don't
use
know.
number?
I
or
would have to
just
ask
curious?
our IT folks. I haven't asked that question recently.
Yeah. And if not, can we promote it in a better way, or what's that?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's an
I
awesome
think
resource.
it is. It's really neat. And we did get some great media coverage this year. It was in AVL Today a couple of times. And then, of course, Bountiful Cities promoted it in our newsletter and social media and things like that.
I'd say something else Aurora is helping us with is to create some social media assets to be able to promote things when they're in season, so that the city can put it out there for whoever's tuned into our channels.
Great.
And is it only city property that,
No, my understanding is that the inputs can be on private property if the folks who own the land are willing for just anyone to come by and harvest.
So
Joel-
again, double check Tim's inputs.
Joel's apple tree?
Tim has some beautiful blueberries that are about to
There's
ripen.
some
good to
peach
know.
trees and pawpaws.
Yeah.
You work on a lot of stuff, and I was just curious, how many staff members do you have on your team?
Well, right now, we have about 5, and some of us are part-time. So not a whole lot. We work hard.
Yeah, and I think my follow-up to that is, what do you need in continued support to keep all these great programs going?
Well, definitely, something that Bridget mentioned is the social media. We can always use outreach support. We have our channels that we go through, and we have really good engagement with our newsletter. Pretty good engagement with our social media, and we would love to have all of our events, even if they're not city events. We'd love to have more engagement and support from anyone at all who would like to promote them. And beyond that, we've been working on the contract for the next fiscal year with the City of Asheville, and we're excited to be continuing to partner on a lot of the things that were outlined in this. But really, if there are funding resources that come across your radars that align with the work that Bountiful Cities does, please get in touch with me. We are always looking for new funding resources, and it is, as it is with many nonprofits, it is a constant challenge to keep up with being able to pay people, honestly. And when we can't, we have to cut our programming, and that feels really hard. So thanks for asking that question.
Great, Steve?
Two quick ones. One is, what a general sense of what size budget do you have to do all of these programs? And the second one is, did I understand that the answer to the number, it is answerable, the number of views to the map? It's a matter of checking on that?
I don't know. I have to check I haven't
Okay.
asked that question.
It's a great question. I'd be interested, if it is answerable, maybe just shoot it out to us. That'd be great.
This is a complicated question because Bountiful Cities has served as a fiscal pass-through organization since its inception. We started out as a nonprofit supporting urban food security at a time when there were 0 community gardens in the city of Asheville. And so we were able to get funding as a nonprofit and pass that along to communities that were starting community-led initiatives in order to have more access to fresh food. So our budget, at first glance is around $500,000 a year, but that is because we manage funds for several very small entities that are not their own 501c3, but are doing amazing work within their communities and engaging in a really grassroots way. And you may have heard of Southside Farm, for example. They do not yet have their own 501c3 status, and so we have served as a fiscal agent for them, and even there's a Tierra Fertel in Hendersonville. We fiscal agent that group as well. So complicated answer.
Yes, it is. And roughly, what share of that 500,000 is reflected in this contract with the city?
I believe it's $30,000.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else for Kathy?
Did you have a question?
No, I just said thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, that takes us to new business, item 4B, annual retreat, which will be presented by me. Well, we had a retreat last year. I think it was in October, and we'd like to have one again. And the intention of the retreat is planning basically for the year, setting our goals and all of the work that we want to do in the following year. So I don't know if we need to have a vote on whether or not to have a retreat. I think that's maybe more of a given. The 2 dates that we had set up for this were either October 15th or 16th. And that's a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And we were thinking of doing it similar to last year, where we just had maybe 2 hours or so designated for it, and we'll put an agenda together. I'd like to open it up for any comments if people thought it was too short, too long, just right. And also the venue, Steve offered the gazebo in his neighborhood. We could choose that again, or if somebody else has an alternate location, we're open to that too. So just open for opinions. Anyone?
Thank you, Steve,
Thanks, Steve.
for offering.
Oh, sure, yeah, and of course, if anywhere else you guys want to do this, fine, it's just be happy to do it, if you think that's the best thing to do. Do we want to get into the weeds and see if October 15th, 16th works for everybody?
Yeah, if people have their calendars in front of them, or we could do a doodle poll if you don't have that in front of you now.
Works for me.
I'm good with both.
Okay, and we would likely do it in the afternoon when it gets a little bit cooler, say regular meeting time, thereabouts. Everyone's good with both, or? Okay, great. Do you want to keep it, Bridget, do you have a preference? I know you and Kiara kind of do the bulk of the work. And
We'll check the calendars and then send something out to confirm.
okay,
If those dates are looking pretty good, then we'll send something out to make it happen. The only thing I'll mention, we continue at the same location, just for members of the public. We won't be able to record it since we won't be in this room, so it'll be open to the public. People can come and watch the meeting and participate in the public comment section, but it won't be recorded and viewable online, so just a FYI to all our YouTube listeners out there.
okay.
Were people good with the amount of time that we spent together? Feels good?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. Everybody's so agreeable today. That takes us to our last item, 4B. September meeting, Bridget, Steve, and I had met, and it turns out that all of us are going to be away during the September meeting, so we thought about potentially canceling it, since we'll all be out of state or out of the country then. Any opinions about
Same here.
September meeting? Okay.
Great.
All right, so we will cancel our September meeting, and we'll see everybody in October for the retreat. You'll be getting some emails about details, et cetera. So that takes us to our public comment period. Do we have any comments from the public? Bridget?
We did not receive any via email or voicemail.
Okay. I guess everybody's on vacation for the summer, including the comments. So with that, I would like to adjourn the meeting, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you.